If someone's really freaked out by your unraveling, that often means that what you're doing is in them, but they haven't done it. Because otherwise, why would they care? Right? In other words, they may even find it interesting. They may go, I don't want to do that. I mean, that sounds crazy, but hey, go for it. Enjoy it. But if they freak out, it's not always true, but if they freak out, that is often a sign that their world is on the verge of collapse. And they have built up all these defenses to protect themselves from it. And then you come along, you're pulling this thread, so you're a threat. And you're a threat because people are fearful of that. And so I see that a lot in the US. It's like where someone's kid starts to question. And the funny thing is, but here's the trick as well, it's not that you're unraveling that they're freaked out about. They're freaked out that you're going to talk about it. So I know a guy he's from Mexico, and I was talking to him, and he said, like, when I go back to Mexico, my parents are very religious, so I go to church with them and do all of that. And again, I'm the naive one. I say, well, like, do they not know that you don't believe any of that stuff? And they're like, well, yeah, I mean, they have Facebook and stuff, they know that. But again, what they do is he goes back and they pretend, and so it's not, they don't care that he's doubting, they just want the pretense. Because the pretense is a security blanket to protect them from a certain trauma. You see that if you go home to your parents' house and you're with your partner and you sleep in separate bedrooms. When you live with your partner, back at home, it's like you're all pretending that you sleep in separate bedrooms, you're all sleeping together. Why are you doing that? We all know that that's not what's happening. This is like a fetish object where, imagine a kid comes in with a security blanket. They know they're in a room full of people, but they don't experience the fear of being in the room full of people until you take the security blanket away, and then they experience the fear, right? But as long as the security blanket's there, they're protected from the trauma of what they already know. So as long as their son or their daughter, or whatever it is, doesn't question, we know they are, but as long as they don't say it, I'm protected from experiencing the trauma of that in myself. So when you do that, it opens things up. I was just explaining a certain mechanism there of why people freak out sometimes. So the question is, what do you do? I mean, yeah, I guess it's hard. Like sometimes you go like, okay, I won't. It depends. Like sometimes if you respect someone, you kind of go right, and they're a close family member. You go like, you know what? I'm going to tell you what I'm going through, and you're going to freak out. And because I love you, I'm going to say, I think you're freaking out because you feel the same way I do. You could do that, but you might not want to, You might not want to do it if your mum's 90 years old or your dad's, and you go like, the last thing I want to do is pull that thread right now. But I don't know. I think as long as you're alive, it'll be fun to do. So yeah, that's a hard question. There's no answer to it, except to say that if you're part of a community that freaks out by your question and your unknowing, you're probably reflecting something of their disavowed truth. And then the question is, how do you indirectly help them see that? This is indirect communication, by the way. So resistance is important. Resistance happens all the time. If you see me mistreating my mum, and you say, you're terrible to your mum, I'll say, no, I'm not. She's a nightmare. You wouldn't believe how idiotic she is, right? She's mustard, crazy, right? But if you take me out for a drink and then you say, oh, listen, you look stressed. What's going on? I might say, yeah, I am, and I really took it out on my mum, right? You indirectly allowed me space to be able to bring something, and then I was able to face it. Even if I think I mistreated my mum, if you tell me directly, I'm going to defend myself because you're attacking my ego, so my defenses go up. So a lot of the work, and by the way, this is what I believe the work of the church is to go, okay, let's not directly communicate. I'm not here to freak you out and go, you're all, whatever. How do I tell a story? Use jokes. Humor is very, very good for this. How do I, tell a Seamus story that kind of gets around defense mechanisms and gets me to go, oh yeah, actually, you know what? God, I am a bit scared of like asking questions, and actually, you know what? I have terrible migraines, and I can't sleep without something on the radio because I think as soon as I turn the radio off, all my doubts come out, all my fears come out, and it freaks me out. So I have to always listen to something. So that's the art of indirect communication that we as individuals, I think, need, and also as communities. And that's why parables are so important. Jesus used parables all the time. They're easy to write as well. I mean, they don't no character development, none of that. So parables are wonderful. Jokes Music is amazing at getting around defense mechanisms. That's what, one of my favorite quotes, you probably heard me say. Kierkegaard said, what is a poet? A poet is someone who screams and cries in agony, but whose lips are so formed that when they cry out, beautiful music is formed. So when we say to the poet, sing to us again, we are saying, may new disasters befall you, right? So in other words, there's a musician here, and they're singing, and all they're doing is screaming. But they just happen to have this talent where their screams sound quite beautiful, right? But what happens is you listen to that, and then your pain that you can't directly access begins to creep out. Through listening to their screams and agony, you can appreciate it as a music critic, says Kierkegaard, or as a lover. If you can participate in it, and then they begin to help you mourn, bring stuff to the surface that you wouldn't otherwise be able to bring to the surface. Now, the issue is, if it's family members, it's really hard to do indirect communication because they know what an asshole you are and you know what an asshole they are. And so there's not a lot of forgiveness, So I don't know how you do it with family members. I think it's much tougher unless you've got really good relationships. But often it's the art of indirect communication.